Hi everyone, welcome to the Debate Impacts podcast. I'm your host, Muchi Sin, and this is the podcast to listen to if you want a firsthand, candid look into the world of speech and debate. Each week, we'll hear from alumni, current students, instructors, coaches, or parents about their personal stories and experiences in speech and debate and why they believe speech and debate has the power to change lives. I'm honored to be presenting to you the inaugural episode of Debate Impacts. This project is sponsored by the J.W. Patterson Foundation, a 501c3 organization dedicated to expanding access to speech and debate to all students, regardless of financial constraints. Though I've been involved in debate for a short time in comparison to many of the alumni and coaches you'll hear from, I am equally as passionate about the power of speech and debate to change lives. My goal is to capture the personal stories and unique experiences of those whose lives, careers, and families have benefited and in some cases been fundamentally changed by their involvement with the activity. Thank you so much for being with us. This inaugural episode is both incredibly special and bittersweet. We'll hear an interview I did with Dr. J.W. Patterson, the person for whom the foundation was named, recorded last fall, only a number of weeks before his sudden passing on December 30th, 2023, at the age of 95. For those who don't know him, Dr. Patterson has been described as a legend in the world of speech and debate. He became the director of the University of Kentucky Debate and Forensics program in 1971, and over the next 40 years, UK earned a national reputation for excellence, producing multiple generations of award-winning debaters. Amongst his many accomplishments, Dr. Patterson founded the highly esteemed National Tournament of Champions, or TOC, in 1972, designed to bring together the best high school debaters in the country. Today, the Tournament of Champions still serves as the pinnacle of the debate season. Here with me to celebrate this inaugural episode is his daughter, Elizabeth Patterson, and the president of the J.W. Patterson Foundation. So, hi, Elizabeth. Thank you so much for being here with us today and for sharing the story and the legacy of J.W. Patterson and how he was outside of speech and debate, as well as inside speech and debate.
Yeah, well, first, Michi, if you don't mind, I just want to kind of turn back to you and your family and your experience, because I think it's so incredibly special the way this whole project came about. I'm so thrilled to be here and that this is finally reality. We've been talking about this for a year now and getting different people involved. And so just to let everyone know, I just happened to be sitting with my dad about a year ago this time, maybe a little bit earlier. And he gets a call from your mom who says, we've never met, but I think you may know my husband, Charlie. And I was sitting there and we had a long conversation and she invited us out to lunch. So tell everyone, if you wouldn't mind, just kind of like, your stage and your experience with debate right now.
Yeah, definitely. So I briefly mentioned this in the introduction, but I have been involved in debate for a while. I think about 6 years now. I've been doing different formats, and it's all because of my dad. My dad was extremely passionate about debate. He debated in high school, and he basically attributes the activity to like being the reason he's here today and being the reason he's been so successful. He attributes it to his communication skills, presentation skills, research skills, all of which are extremely important to like any kind of career. So when he was debating, he was the only Asian debater at TOC. He came from like the South, where often he was like scrutinized and discriminated against for his race. And debate really gave him an avenue to find his voice and find something that he was really good at, as well as interact with the world. He was a great debater. He was like one of the best in the nation at the time. And he ended up getting recruited to Harvard for debate, which really changed his life. And he attributes all of the things that came after that basically to debate. And now both him and my mom, who although she did debate when she was younger, they're both involved in my school's debate program, which is so incredibly important. It's a program of over 100 students that travels regularly on the national circuit. Every single tournament is an amazing opportunity for all of us. And the reason that they're involved in that and that they're able to help these hundreds of other kids get access to speech and debate is because my dad recognizes how important the activity is and just loves it so much.
Yeah, so we had never met, and I'm sitting there with my
Yeah.
dad, and your mom says, "Hey, we're going to be in Lexington in a couple of weeks." You know, my Michi qualified for the TOC, and I don't think, how many trips have you made to Lexington? I know you're coming in another couple of weeks for this year's.
Yeah. I've been to Lexington 3 times. This next one for the next TOC is going to be my fourth.
Yes, which is just incredibly amazing that you've qualified and have such a stellar record. It's a lot of hard work on your part. That's what that represents. So yeah, we went out to lunch and we're just talking, and you were talking about the nonprofit that you started and podcast that you've done for it, and I made the comment just off the cuff, oh, I think it'd be great if our foundation, were to do something similar to really like capture people's stories and voices, and you just completely jumped in and took the bull by the horn and said, I'd love to do that. And so, fast forward a year later and here we are. So I think I'm so excited about all the potential this has. And
Yeah.
I will add also that at the time, of course, my dad was alive, and since then he's passed away. And so it has all the more of meaning, I think, now to me certainly, and really to serve as a tribute to him.
Yeah, definitely. I think that this podcast and the JW Patterson Foundation in general is just so important to his legacy. Obviously, when he was in speech and debate, he strived to make it a more equitable space and a space where debaters could do what they loved at a very high level of competition. One of the reasons he created the TOC. So I think that this podcast and the foundation's work in general in giving underprivileged kids access to speech and debate is so incredibly important.
Yes,
So,
yeah.
yeah. So let's get into some of the background, maybe of the foundation or of JW. So, what led him to start debating or get involved in debate?
Um, you know, he told me, I heard him say so many times, how kids many kids just kind of stumble into the activity, when you're 12 or 14, 16, you don't, or even in college, you don't necessarily go into it for the wonderful things that you end up getting out of it. But like so many, he did not. He was from a tiny little town. His grade school, he was literally in a two-room school from grade school all the way through 12th grade. And it was very rural, and no debate, no one's ever heard of it. And then he goes to college and happened to, as I said, like many kids, stumble into the activity. He
Yeah.
really liked the professor who coached, and just, I guess, literally got hooked at that point.
Mm-hmm. So, he ended up not only did he debate and compete on the circuit, he also came back to coach. So, why did he continue to stay in the activity even after he graduated?
Yeah, he kind of reached this fork in the road. Well, he coached a high school team for 9 years, which is in a little town in Oklahoma, Muskogee, and that's how my parents met. My mom was actually an Oklahoma State champion policy debater, which was really interesting. My dad graduated college in 3 years, so the age difference between them was only like 3 or 4 years. She goes away to college, and then they start dating and get married, and he sort of reached this fork in the road, as I said, where he was deciding between law school or whether to get his PhD. And I think he loved the activity so much, and he loved teaching, that he ended up going to Michigan for his master's, and then to the University of Oklahoma for his PhD. And soon after that, well, he spent a year in Arizona in the speech and communications department, and then got this job here in Lexington at the University of Kentucky. And interestingly, he always laughed about it, because he said he at that point really wanted to focus on, teaching and writing and research, and said, I'm not gonna coach debate, and somehow got, pulled back into it. I think there was a gap in coaches one year, and they asked if he could help out, and then he never left. So and just really took the program at the University of Kentucky. It was a strong program, and I think he turned it into, a national
Mhm.
presence.
Oh yeah, he definitely transformed the University of Kentucky's debate program into like a national powerhouse. And it sounds like, based on how you describe it, debate was more than a job for him. It was more than like just coaching students. It was more than just an activity. It was kind of a lifestyle, right? So, what was it like to be his daughter and witness his involvement in the activity and how he transformed it over time?
Yeah, well, I mean, the first time I was exposed to debate, I think I was, 3 or 4. I don't really have that. I literally grew up on the University of Kentucky campus and have known generations of both high school and college debaters as a result. My first trip was to Novice Nationals in Evanston to Northwestern when I was, I think, 6. But I, of course, didn't really have appreciation for what he was doing at all. It was just the way things were, as it is when you're a kid. And it wasn't really until I guess I got into I guess latter years of high school, college myself, that I really realized like what he had done at that point, and his significance in the debate world, as year after year, students would graduate, and then he would reconnect with them, and they would, say to him what a difference the activity had made, and what a difference he had made in their lives. And so, to answer your question, I guess it really kind of all came forward to me at that point, what just the significance of the activity and how it did impact people.
Mm-hmm. And I think that that's one of the central theses of the J.W. Patterson Foundation, that debate can change lives, and that's why so many people need access to this kind of activity. So, when did he found the J.W. Patterson Foundation, and what was his like vision for the foundation?
Well, actually, he wasn't the one who founded it. Some of my closest friends are debaters, and we had a one of his debaters from the 70s who had never debated before, came to UK and actually had, I think, a stutter. He had some sort of speech impediment, and went through, I think, I don't know how they laughed about it later, like the entire year, like not even winning a round or something like that. And he ended up getting to the finals, I believe, of NDT by his senior year.
Wow.
So it was really a remarkable story. But he lived with us his freshman year, and I'm an only child, and he kind of became like a big brother. He became like part of our family. We knew his family and visited them in Bardstown, Kentucky. His name was Jim Flegel. Unfortunately, he passed away in November of 22. But he had called me on multiple occasions and said, I really want to do something to continue your dad's legacy. And another Kentucky debater, Gil Skillman, who's now a professor at Wesleyan in Connecticut, kind of got together and, came to me and said, we'd really love to do something in his honor. And after multiple conversations, we decided to create a 501(c)(3), and yeah, and the rest is history. So my dad was definitely involved in it, because, he was alive and very active in it. But it was really, the alumni who came together with the whole idea.
Wow, that's a great story. And I didn't even know that the alumni were kind of like the reason that the J.W. Patterson Foundation was founded. But that's
Mm.
honestly very fitting considering the mission of the foundation.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah. So, right now, what kind of work does the J.W. Patterson mainly do, and why is that so important to both you, and why was it very important to Dr. Patterson?
Yeah. I think that He loved the activity, obviously, on many different levels, but I think, behind that for him, behind, the activity itself, it was a vehicle for my dad. His whole person and his whole value system centered around people and their different perspectives, their different backgrounds, and really merging those perspectives and being able to, have discourse around them. And it was very, very important to him that you be able to see, he thought it was invaluable to be able to see every side of every issue, right? So there's so many people, and in the world today, my goodness, it couldn't be more better, better illustrated. Just the polarization and the importance of people being able to come together and voice different perspectives and really learn from that. So I think, for him, speech and debate was more of a vehicle that represented, that brought, all these fundamental skills together in terms of critical thinking, being able to speak on your feet, but research and an understanding of the full the full depth of any issue, and not really just taking one side. But the fact that you had to get on your feet and argue, an issue from different sides within 3 or 4 hour time span, was invaluable.
Mhm. Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think so. Basically, every single speech and debate student or alum can attest to the fact that speech and debate really broadens your perspective, allows you to view every single issue, not just from like your viewpoint, but also the perspective of others. I think it makes us more empathetic and less like quick to judge others and quick to judge people whose opinions are different from us. I really like that you bring up like the multiple perspectives because I think in debate, it can be seen in a bunch of different ways. First, most obviously, in debate, you have to debate both sides. So you get a very deep view of both perspectives of specific issues. But another thing about debate is that it brings people together from all kinds of different backgrounds. So I remember when I was interviewing JW, he talked about the debate space before the TOC and before initiatives like the JW Patterson Foundation or Urban Debate Leagues and stuff like that. So, can you tell me a little bit about that? What was the debate space like before the TOC? Or even like, what was the debate space like when you were growing up watching JW Patterson participate in debate?
Yeah, well, as I said, I was little, like, I was when he started the TOC, I was, I don't know, what, 4 or something like that. So I don't really have a huge perspective. I do know that it was much smaller, and when the first TOC, I think, was, well, it was just policy division and there were only 64 teams. So between 1972, its first year, up into, the year he graduated in 2010, obviously he added, I think the first was LD and then PF, and then came a lot of all the speech events after that. But yeah, so it's amazing how that the whole tournament kind of, expanded. It's interesting too that I didn't realize it until I think it was the 50th celebration of the Tournament of Champions, that he had done something similar in Oklahoma, for high school students. He started at the school he taught at. It was called, I believe, Little Nationals, and it was the same kind of concept, drawing the best debaters from the state together, for a tournament, and it was an invitation only kind of thing. So I really didn't realize that until he basically came to Kentucky and, you know, did the same thing. Of course, it's grown since he was at UK for so long. But yeah, it's really interesting the way it came about. But unfortunately, I can't speak too much to the debate space before because, I was too young.
Okay, so kind of pivoting, like you mentioned earlier, debate was more than a job to him. It was kind of a lifestyle. I mean, he was so involved. You witnessed it from, your childhood to your adulthood. So how did debate influence how he lived the rest of his life?
So my dad, and I didn't think much of it at the time, but looking back now, it's really meaningful. My dad loved people, and I think he loved being a professor and coaching for this very reason. Like, he was constantly meeting, new students every year, and he has kept in touch with them, with so many of them, over the years, through their graduation, graduate school, marriage. He's at their weddings, he knows their children, and it's really phenomenal. But I think that he loved people. He loved seeing a student sort of at the beginning in their freshman year, especially those who had never been exposed to debate, and how it changed them intellectually, but how it changed their character, and it's impacted like who they are. I think you used the word empathy earlier, and I think that's really at the core of what the activity does for you, in terms of really being able to step into someone else's shoes, even though you don't know them. You hear their experience, and you're able to relate to it and understand it, and understand what motivates people to act the way they do, or think and say the way they you know say things that the way they do, just their whole perspective. I think that was very important to him, as a society, that we have empathy in that way, and that we're able to understand people from all angles. But one of the things that's striking to me, and now how as an adult I can see how the interplay between how he lived his life and what he did as a profession. But I remember going in the 70s, one of his closest friends, and so it would have made my dad somewhere in his 50s, but one of his closest friends was in his late 80s, he and his wife, and we went every single weekend to see them. And he was one of his closest friends at the time. He knew him up until his death. And there are just not many people that are friends with someone that close, that are 30 years older. And the flip side of that is that at the same time, he had very, very close friends who were in their 20s. And for example, when my dad was in the ICU this past December, um, this couple who he was extremely close with were in their late 20s. And they weren't from the debate world, but he he just loved people, and he sort of was magnetic in that way. People just kind of grew attached to him, and I just think it's really significant to how I think it's very representative of him in general and his value system, the fact that he had appreciated people at all ages, from all backgrounds.
Yeah, I really like the way that you describe it, like magnetic, because it sounds like he attracted people, old and young, in debate, outside of debate. So, what do you think? What about him made him magnetic? What gave him this broad appeal to everybody, it sounds like?
Yeah, I think people appreciated the f- I think people appreciated the fact that he was so interested in them as people. We have a really close neighbor who's a very close friend, has become very close friends with him. But he made the comment one time, your dad was one of the few people who really just didn't want anything from me. He just wanted friendship, and he just wanted to know him and understand him. And I think that really resonated with people. I think people very much appreciated that, and they appreciated that he was accepting of them. I mean, my dad went to get his hair cut and became close friends with the person who cut his hair. He went down to have, a bourbon, which was his drink of choice, at a local restaurant, and became, great friends with a server there. So it's very interesting. And I as a kid, I kind of rolled my eyes, because it's like we could hardly move 2 feet without talking, having a long conversation with someone. And we always had people at our home, and it was just, my dad was like a true extrovert in that sense, and he really derived his energy from other people, and I think people just really appreciate that because it's rare.
Yeah. It sounds like he was very, lively, very engaged, full of life, basically, until the very end. So even given his age when he passed, was it still a shock to you?
You know, it was, and people, as I said a minute ago, kind of laughed at me like he's 95, how shocking could it be? But he was, after Thanksgiving, my dad did everything to the fullest. Like if he
Hmm.
liked something, he loved something. He was just very passionate. He was passionate about debate, of course. He was passionate about music. People know him for his interest in music, and he actually had a little trivia thing that he posted weekly on Thursdays on Facebook. My dad was a huge Facebook lover because he had so many people from all over. We were actually at a debate tournament for my kids. My dad went with me for one of my sons who was debating, and we were sitting waiting for him to get out of a round, and my dad wasn't on Facebook. And I was like, you really need to get on Facebook. I think you'd really enjoy it. This was years ago. And he said, well, I don't know how to do that. Show me how to do that. And so I made a profile for him on Facebook, and we woke up the next day and he had like, I don't know, 300 friend requests or something.
Oh
It
my.
was, it was just
Hmm.
remarkable. But it was a shock because that had not changed.
Hmm.
His energy level hadn't changed. His physical activity hadn't changed. He started after Thanksgiving, he started decorating for Christmas. So by the third week in December, he was fully decorated. He was entertaining. He was playing, his Christmas songs. He was loved candles. He loved his outdoor fire pit. All that was going full throttle. So, I got a call one morning from a ER doc saying, I have your dad here on a ventilator. And we had spoken the night before. He'd had a friend over, and his friend Tim O'Mara, they were up until, I don't know, 10 or 10:30 talking and listening to music. So he literally lived life to the end in that
Hmm.
regard. He was only in the hospital 9 days, but he just went from, it just went overnight, it seemed. So in that regard, it was a huge shock because he was just so fully living still,
Hmm.
which is wonderful. That's how, that's every person's, I think, best scenario in terms of an
Yeah.
end of life, the way things play out. So he was very fortunate that way.
Yeah. I remember I didn't know him for the longest time, but I met him in person about a little over 3 months before he passed. And you're right, he was just so full of life, so energetic. I couldn't believe that he was 95 at the time. And yeah, the only thing that indicated any kind of age was his hearing. And he was just so engaged. He great memory too. He would tell stories of debaters that he had met like decades before. I was very impressed.
Yeah,
So,
when your mom called a year ago and said, "Hey, we should all get together." And I don't know if you'll remember my husband Charlie, and instantly my dad knew exactly who that
yeah.
was. Remembered him vividly, so his memory was fully intact.
Hmm.
That's for
That's impressive. Yeah. Especially given the number of debaters and obviously people outside of debate that he's met, connected with throughout his lifetime. It's very impressive to remember each and every single one. And I think that means a lot to people. So, after his death, how can people kind of honor his legacy and honor the way that he lived his life?
Yeah, so the Patterson Foundation now takes on new meaning, certainly for me, and in terms of the desire to keep his legacy going. It will live on in the form of TOC, but the purpose behind the foundation is really to give kids with financial constraints the opportunity to have exposure to the activity in many different forms, whether that be summer camp, whether that means literally just the ability to participate, on a debate team. We're mainly focused on high school kids. But I think that, my dad came from nothing. I mean, he, was born into a home that had dirt floors and no plumbing and no electric. And he really credits debate as literally pulling him out of, um, that environment and opening up his world. And I think that's really what the foundation stands for all of those of us who were involved in it. And so our goal is to really help coaches and kids to have exposure, as I said, on whatever level. My dad used to say, you don't have to even debate for long for it to have an enormous benefit. You don't have to debate all through high school and all through college, just that exposure alone. And so I guess that's our goal. His birthday was May 9th. And so this May 9th, we are going to have a tribute to him, and would love people to be as involved as they can with that, just to sort of recognize him and recognize, the importance of the foundation to him and carrying on his legacy.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like debate really has had a transformative impact both on JW's life, your life, and the lives of the countless others that he's connected with and that he's coached. So the one of a great way to honor that, of course, would be to donate and participate on May 9th. And just to end off this podcast, what are some stories or anecdotes that you've seen of debate changing lives?
Well, speaking to, as I said, what was most important to him, in terms of what it can do, to change a life for someone who, especially with financial constraints, um, just to be able to see. I think my dad was very, very proud of the fact that so many of his students came to Kentucky and got into the activity from very, low income backgrounds, many first generation college students, as my dad was definitely, in his family. And so I think, being able to impact kids on a continual basis for us, for the foundation, in that same spirit is really the goal. So, Michi, we've talked a lot about, my perspective in terms of how debate impacted my dad and how it impacted so many of his students. I'd love to hear from your perspective, especially being the daughter of a debater. How it's impacted your life and what you've been able to, benefit, how you've been able to benefit as a result.
Yeah, definitely. Debate has basically changed every single like part of my life. At a basic level, it's made me a better communicator. It's the reason that I do these podcasts, both through the JW Patterson Foundation and through my nonprofit. It's the reason that I'm able to communicate with people, find unity. And debate has made me like more, I guess, cognizant of other people's viewpoints. It's made me more empathetic. Every single point or opinion that I have, I try to consider like the counter thesis or what somebody else would think. That's not something that I automatically did before I joined this activity at all. But to me, obviously the portable skills are great. They're going to help me in whatever job I decide to do. They're going to help me in college, all of that. But something about debate that's changed my life the most is probably the community. Um, I've been in other activities where there's been a community, obviously, but it's never been this strong. Some of my friends that I've met through debate camps or that I met in debate during middle school, I still talk to. And I don't need to talk to them constantly to maintain the relationship. We just check in with one another every couple of months. We know how each other are doing on the circuit competitively. And it's very like wholesome. And I just think that debate really brings people together. It gets a lot of people talk bad about debate for creating division or being too argumentative, but I think it's actually quite the opposite. Even though in round we do kind of argue with each other, we oppose one another, outside of round the community is really strong and interconnected.
Yeah, you really touched on so many of the different aspects that have seen in his students generation after generation in terms of, well, basically everything you said in terms of, your ability to communicate, your ability to understand others and others' perspectives, and really the community. I mean, I think that it's so interesting what sort of people's perception of debate and of the debate community outside of it is, in contrast to the way it really is. And it is such a tight knit, you said it, it's such a tight knit community, because it's so intense. You spend so many hours working, and you know people from all over, and you see them at tournaments, week after week, and it creates this bond that's incredible. I will say, I mean, I'm looking back at generations of my dad's students, and there's a cluster from the 90s, for example, and they're spread out all over the country. They get together every single year, and
Yeah.
when they get together, all those it's all those memories, and you do hear them, like, if you just walk into a room, I know, and I've picked up this trait in my boys, who've two of them now have debated. But we'll be just batting back and forth. I know a friend of ours came to dinner one night. My dad was there, and all three of my boys were there. And I don't even know what we were talking about, but we were just like going at each other. And the pitch was getting higher and higher. And finally, my friend was like, boy, I wasn't expecting this argument to break out. I'm sorry, I didn't mean for this to start an argument. And my dad looked over at me like, we're not arguing. Oh no, we're not arguing. We're fine. We're just, and my boys chimed in, oh no, no, I just liked it, and making their point. And it's really interesting. I think what it does to you is when you get a bunch of debaters in a room, but it is very representative of how tight the community is. And it's a phenomenal, I say this all the time, one of the things that personally I have loved about being involved in the foundation is being able to meet. It's an incredible group of people, and I don't think in any other realm of my life have I ever met such an impressive, intellectually and character wise, certainly accomplishment wise, a group of people as I have through the debate world. So, Michi, I just want to thank you. It's just phenomenal what you're doing, and you're relatively so young, if I can say that, to have the perspective that you do, to be as involved, and to really be able to understand the value of the activity the way you do at your age is phenomenal. And I really appreciate all you've done with this project. It's really going to be an enormously valuable dimension to the foundation. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for being here on the podcast and for giving me this kind of platform to talk about debate because it is an activity that I love very much.